You're listening to Artistic Finance, show 171. On today's show, I interview two of the union organizers who helped Drunk Shakespeare join the Actors Equity Association. Ella Fent from the Chicago production and Clara Kundin from the Phoenix Company talk about the long day's journey into unionizing, a journey which is still ongoing. We discuss their reasons for unionizing, navigating the process of joining Actors Equity, the benefits gained through union membership, and advice for other theater workers considering unionizing. There's video of this interview on YouTube. The link is in the show notes and at artisticfinance.com/171. Without further ado, let's get to the show.
You are listening to Artistic Finance, where we help creatives learn about the business of show business.
Welcome and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Ethan Steimel. Today I welcome Drunk Shakespeare performers Clara Kundin and Ella Fent to discuss banding the various locations of Drunk Shakespeare together and its workers to join Actors Equity. We're recording this August 19th, 2024. Clara here is a theater maker and educator and was part of the original Phoenix cast of Drunk Shakespeare. She's currently an assistant professor at Eastern New Mexico University. Ella is a bartender for Drunk Shakespeare in Chicago and has been for the last 3 years and has been part of Drunk Shakespeare United since day one. Okay, I've mentioned some things about you guys. Clara, I'll start with you. What else should we know about your life or career?
Well, I've been a professional actor freelance for the past a long time. Maybe I won't say how many years. But I actually worked non-union for most of my career, which I think is kind of interesting because I primarily worked in like experimental kind of avant-garde theater, which is never unionized, and children's theater, which is often not unionized. It kind of depends. And so when I was living in New York, I found that everyone was saying like, oh, you definitely want to join the union. And I was looking around at a lot of my friends in the union there and I was saying, I'm making a better living not being part of the union, which is kind of bananas because I'm so like pro-union that I always felt a little like crazy about that. But it was really because of working at Drunk Shakespeare. You know, I moved to Phoenix for grad school and just auditioned for the show, thinking it would be a support job. And then it kind of consumed, my life. And I started working there a lot. But it was really because of that experience. And we'll talk more about that process, but of unionizing that I finally was like, okay, now is the time to join Actors Equity. So it's been kind of a long journey to get to that part. And now I'm in New Mexico starting a whole new kind of adventure as a professor. So we'll see. I'm really curious to see how I balance that kind of life of being an actor versus being a teacher. I'm in an area that has no theater except for the university. So I'll be commuting maybe to 4 hours to Santa Fe to the nearest union theater. I'm not sure. So I've got some things to figure out as I am here, but I'm still involved with the union leadership in Drunk Shakespeare as we continue to negotiate contracts. So I'm still staying in there.
Amazing. Yeah, I'll be interested. I hope maybe we'll talk about that a little later. With USA 829, which is the design union, which I'm a part of, I can go do non-union work and it's not a problem. But Actors Equity, it's a little trickier. Like you can't really do that. Ella, how about you? What else should we know about your life or career?
Yeah, so I've been doing theater kind of my whole life. I grew up in theater. My aunt does theater reviews in St. Louis, so I've been hanging around actors for an unfortunate amount of time. And I was doing stuff on stage and off stage. I was constantly flipping between like actor and stage manager. And then I moved to Chicago about 3 years ago, and I was like, oh, a fun little serving Shakespeare job. This is scratching that theater itch without like having to get on stage and do all of that. And it was a lot of fun. And then when we started this unionizing process, April 2023, I had a complete career change. I fell in love with it. I got the union bug. I went through training with the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee. They put me through their like Union Training 101. And now I'm a full-time volunteer with them. We help other young baby organizers either train to become full-fledged organizers, or we help any workplace that contacts us, and we try and figure out what steps they need towards getting their own union. And they were so helpful when we were originally organizing Chicago. But yeah, and now I do a lot more organizing stuff outside of here. 2 months ago, there was a Labor Notes conference, which is a big labor magazine here in Chicago. I got to speak on a panel there about climate change and environmental issues and how unions can have an effect on that. And that was called Fight the Boss, Fix the Climate. But yeah, and I do a lot with Actors Equity. I'm on their committee for, keep forgetting the name of it. It's very long, but it's the prevention of harassment. But we work on fixing toxic theater workspaces.
So, just to get to know you guys, your personalities, what is a live event that you like to experience as an audience member?
Well, I like to go to other theater. I just saw in Santa Fe a pretty cool young company called Exodus Ensemble that is doing immersive theater, which I'm always kind of a bad immersive theater audience or interactive theater audience, because when I go, I'm like, no, 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 I don't want to be working right now. Don't use me. But I really did enjoy this experience. The show I saw was an adaptation of a Chekhov play, but very contemporary, very fun, sexy, and silly. So I enjoy that kind of like immersive DIY kind of experimental, a lot of nudity always in these types of shows. But I'm also, a sucker for a big musical. Like one of my favorite experiences was seeing Legally Blonde, and I was in London when I was in college, and just I like came back singing. I'm a musical girly, so I don't know, there's very little that I don't enjoy in theater. And then I love going to the opera. That's kind of the career I wish I had the vocal pipes for, but not quite there. So I like to go, and the ballet. Those are kind of the two outside of theater that I will spend my time.
I guess because I've been a part of theater so much, and maybe a lot of like basement theater, I always think of ballet and opera as like the classy things. And I'm like, oh yeah, I don't want that dirty theater show. Like, let's go to that.
I know. I always like an opportunity to like dress up. I'm going to the opera, which I think like opera is working to like get rid of that like connotation and be more.
They're not succeeding so far, but yeah.
But I kind of like that part of it. I'm like, yeah, let's be snooty and play dress up. It'll be fun.
I love when people dress up to go see like theater. We'll have people come into Drunk Shakespeare, and like they have on like their fanciest outfits, and they're so excited. And I'm like, I wish we were as classy as you were dressed for.
All right, Ella, what's a live event that you like to experience as an audience member?
I often like to joke that I have the same like taste in theater as like a 5-year-old. I love a spectacle. If someone pulls out a puppet, I am like seated. I love a puppet. I love a puppet so much. I kind of have the flip of Clara. I also love immersive theater, but I am such a good audience member. Like I sit there like I'm getting graded on being an audience member for these things. And I'm like, oh, you want me to laugh at this? Oh, you're so funny. I will laugh very hard about this. And so I put all of my acting energy these days into being a great audience member, and they love it.
We need good audiences.
All right, so now a money question. Are you bad or good with money? And I've been accused of this question being binary, so you can also view it as, what is your relationship with money?
Okay, well, I'd say I think I'm good at money, but I never have enough of it. So I don't know if that's a failure of me or the money or the system. I'm actually doing for a different project. I'm keeping a money diary right now. I think something that people listening who are freelancers will understand is, of course, like how hard it is to keep track of or to make any kind of budget when your income varies. And that's a huge reason actually of why Drunk Shakespeare unionized, was we needed financial stability to understand like how much are we getting paid next month. My mom's actually a financial advisor, so I grew up with a lot of good common sense taught to me about my finances. Also just a lot of financial privilege in that sense. So like I have a retirement account only because my mother like set it up for me, and now I pay into it, but I don't know that I would have known to do that without her. So I'd say I'm probably slightly above average, but I work in an industry that makes it really hard to be good at money.
Yep, totally understand. That all checks out. Ella, what about you?
I'm terrible with money. My current budgeting system is when I get my paycheck, it goes into like three different bank accounts, and like only allowed to like be logged in and checking the balance of one of them, because if I see money, I'm spending it. Everyone in my family is bad with money too. Like I love to buy a little treat. The Entertainment Community Fund actually has a lot of workshops for like financial advisement, and they have been absolute angels, and they're so sweet. I love all of them. But that's kind of one of the things we worked on is Ella doesn't get to see the money.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, we had Rebecca Selko on the show, who is the Entertainment Community Fund's finance educator. I cannot pitch that organization enough because all their stuff is free, like all the classes and all that sessions, all their resources are free to anybody connected to theater at all or like live events at all. If you're listening to this and you're like, oh, I don't really do theater, but I like it, like that's enough for you to get access to all the free stuff. Then they're doing workshops and stuff constantly. Something that I'm like a little grumpy about, but also like completely makes sense is that they're really good about helping people transition from live events to like other careers.
I love their career counseling center. I'm like taking those classes right now, and they're angels, all of them, all of them.
It's awesome. Okay, all right. So now let's talk about Drunk Shakespeare. Let's just start off with what is Drunk Shakespeare?
So Drunk Shakespeare is a theatrical event. It falls in the world of like interactive theater. Feels kind of a la sketch comedy, sort of. If you know Drunk History, it's been compared to that. But the premise is that the Society of Drunk Shakespeare, and we, the performers, are society members, along with the serving and bar staff, that we have come together to perform a Shakespearean production. And one of the actors takes approximately 5 shots of their liquor of choice, and we attempt to do the play. Anything you want to add to that, Ella?
No, that sounds like a pretty good brief summary of what we can do.
Yeah, so and the audience can drink, so there's a full bar, so it's like a very raucous. I think like Shakespeare would appreciate it, like Shakespeare for the people comedy.
Please forgive me, but I actually haven't been to Drunk Shakespeare.
Ethan.
I know. Does it take place in a bar or does it take place in a theater?
It's in a library. So there's a bar. The company builds the space out, but it's a library. So there's a bar. Well, in Phoenix, the bar was first. I think that the layout shifts, but there is a bar space. And then the performance space is a library where the society members convene to do Shakespeare.
Okay, and then we've mentioned Phoenix and Chicago and I think DC. Are there any other locations?
New York was the original. And then Houston has a location, though they are not part of the unionizing process, much to our dismay. I know. I think they're missing out. And then there are plans to open new cities, TBD.
And would those be union or not union, or we wouldn't?
They would open as non-union, and then we could go in and unionize them.
All right. So Drunk Shakespeare is now unionized via Actors Equity. Just clarifying, there's no stagehands or designer unions. It's only made up of performers?
Yeah, performers and stage managers who fall under equity, and then all our bar staff is covered under Actors Equity. So some of our bartenders joked like I'm an Actors Equity union bartender, because there's folks like Ella who have connection to theater, but there's also folks who don't have any connection to theater at all, just happen to get a bartending gig, but are now union members of Actors Equity.
It's always really fun to go to Actors Equity events, and people are like, "Oh yeah, are you like a stage manager with equity?" And I go, "Nope, I'm just a bartender."
Okay, yeah, I was going to ask that because I haven't seen the show. So you don't participate in the show. You're really just a bartender. Just.
The servers do go around, and like we used to take care of more props and stuff, but as the company has moved on and built up. That's now entirely for stage managers. But we are part of the show because we are walking through it and we are walking around the actors and serving drinks and we are on stage serving drinks.
And there's an element of improv in the show. So you might have a drunk actor pull a server in and do a bit with them. That happens pretty regularly.
But we're not scripted part of the show.
Got it. Okay. All right. So then, about joining the union, what motivated you to unionize? Who sort of thought this was a good idea? Yeah.
There's a couple different funny ways to tell this story. A lot of the cities had kind of organically started working as like a union kind of does. Like everyone had their own group chats. Like for us, before we unionized, we had a summer with terrible like wildfire smoke and like the air quality was awful every day, right? And so we would get in a group chat and we'd be like, okay, guys, like it's dangerous for us to go outside. We should not be commuting to the theater today. We're all calling in sick. And so it was a like coordinated effort of everyone was like, I'm uncomfortable with the air quality today. I cannot come into the theater. And we would like get the shows canceled or things like that. So we were kind of already working as a union. I know Phoenix, you guys had some stuff too, where you guys like negotiated for raises and things like that. There were a couple of things we kept trying to fight for with our little not legally recognized union that we just kept not winning. And we were like, we need more help than this. Like, obviously, like we're doing our best and we are getting a lot done, but like we need to call in the big guns. And so we started going around and we were researching different theater unions. Actually, we reached out to AGVA first, which is the Variety Artists Guild. And they were like, oh, that sounds more like theater than we do. You should reach out to Actors Equity, which we were very nervous about because there was a rumor started by someone in our upper management that Drunk Shakespeare had tried to reach out to Actors Equity before and they would never work with us because there was drinking on stage.
Yeah, that was one of the Phoenix actors, JT, told me that he had brought up unionizing to one of management and they're like, no, Equity won't do it because it's the drinking. Like that's what's repeated in Phoenix too.
And so we were very nervous about reaching out to Actors Equity. And I reached out to IATSE first because a lot of theaters, when their front of house unionizes, most front of houses are covered in IATSE right now. They aren't part of Actors Equity. But one of our biggest things was in Chicago, we're a very tight-knit group and we didn't want to unionize unless everybody was included. IATSE obviously would not cover our actors. So we reached out to Actors Equity and we were like, hey, like we are like ready to go as soon as like you guys will take us, but like we need to know that everyone will be protected. And they were absolutely wonderful. They're like, yes, we would love to cover your bartenders, especially since so many of your front of house, like serving staff also work as stage managers in the theater. A lot of people like flip on and off between that. So they're like, we'll just count you guys as additional stage managers. And they were absolute angels during that process.
So then when we saw that Chicago had unionized, Stephanie Frey, that she's in charge of organizing efforts at Actors Equity. So once Chicago started working to unionize, she started reaching out to folks in the other cities. Several of us in Phoenix had successfully negotiated for raises based on like once you hit 100 shows, you would get a raise. So not everybody got a raise at once, but everybody had a path to get a raise. So we were already working in kind of a union style of group negotiations. Yeah, Stephanie reached out to me and I, like I said, I'm pretty like pro-union, from the get-go. And so I was, despite not being part of Equity. And so I started talking to the rest of the company and it was kind of a no-brainer. And this timed out with our original manager quit. And we had a phase where we had no manager on site. We had a phase where we had a really bad manager or just a bad fit, let's say. And it was really stressful time. Our bar manager was acting as the manager, but with no extra compensation. Like it was just really, really messy. And that timed out with Chicago unionizing. And we were all like, okay, let's, that sounds like a good idea. So it happened, it was just the timing made it make a lot of sense. And Chicago got voluntary recognition, the Drunk Shakespeare management, and they sent an email saying like, we've done this is happening, you'll read about this. We assume that these are all just Chicago specific problems. And little did they know, we were already in the process of like tallying, people in the company who are pro, doing all that legwork already. In Phoenix, we had 100% voting in favor or signing authorization cards. I think Chicago as well, or at least comparable numbers. So it was a really like kind of natural, unanimous process. And we're fortunate that management voluntarily recognized all of the unions. And so we were then reaching out, Stephanie from equity side, but also members of the company were reaching out to folks in the other cities saying, hey, we're doing this. Do you want to join the bandwagon? And that was successful with DC and with New York ultimately, but not with Houston.
It's kind of crazy how fast we unionized from a union perspective. I'm working with EWOC. I'm trying to help these other workplaces organize. And I've had a couple other theaters like reach out to me because they saw how successful we were. But we started doing actual research into like officially unionizing on April 23rd. And we got voluntary recognition, I want to say like June 2nd. The absolute speed at which we fully unionized was crazy. And every single Drunk Shakespeare location that unionized hit 100% authorization cards, which is like unheard of in other workplaces. And I think it's so nice working with theaters who are trying to unionize because everyone is so social and everybody cares about each other so much. And like we were hanging out outside of work all the time already. Building a union to support each other just kind of came naturally to everybody. No one had to be convinced.
Did Houston take a vote?
Houston did not take a vote.
No, they weren't. So Houston, I've met the Houston manager. He came to Phoenix when we didn't have a manager, and he was wonderful. And so my theory is that they like function pretty well because they have a really, really strong manager there. Not to say that they don't have problems, and I'm curious. Right now, the company nationally is having some ticket sale decline. I hope, use it as an advertisement. I think it's a great show. Come see it. And that's caused some complications in negotiations. And I think Houston, they still could join. I think they would be better protected if they joined the union. But a member from the Houston show came and saw us in Phoenix, and they had some fears that I think equity could alleviate if they talked to them. But ultimately, if they're happy and if the company is working for them, then that's their call.
I'm having trust issues now because you mentioned that somebody in upper management had said that Actors Equity won't talk to you because of the drinking on stage. With Houston, or you had mentioned that ticket sales nationally were declining. How do you know that ticket sales were declining? Like, how do you guys get that information?
Management has told us. And it's also, we could see in each individual cities. And I will say one of the best outcomes of this union process is that now all the cities, except for Houston, all the unionized cities are in contact with each other. And so things that we thought were just specific problems to Phoenix, we're learning, oh, this is actually like a systemic problem across the company. It's not just us. We're not crazy. And so we're able to talk to each other in a way that's really positive. So we just know ticket sales ebb and flow. It's just the nature of theater. And I think it's kind of, they opened a bunch of cities and then there's kind of a natural decline. This is not me ragging on the company. It's just, the fact of the theater.
What I was just like, are they just telling you that ticket sales are down?
No,
oh,
we can see.
Budget is stressed.
Chicago is the second longest running Drunk Shakespeare city. So we are very used to every single summer ticket sales decline by a lot. And every single summer there's a bit of a panic about it. And they're like, oh my gosh, we're canceling so many shows. I'm like, and it happens every July, guys. We're going to be fine.
It sounded like it took 6 weeks to get you the voluntary union, very quick. So I'm just curious now, Houston, I'm not encouraging them to unionize. I mean, whatever. I am
you
encouraging them.
I'm encouraging them.
But I mean, I support you guys, whatever you want to do. But let's say that, a year down the line or something, they decide, oh, we should join in with equity like the other ones. I assume it would only take 6 weeks, or how fast could they join, or how could they join?
I'm going to be honest, a lot of the waiting was we were just waiting for paperwork to go through that Houston wouldn't have to wait on. A very quick summary of like how to organize your workplace 101 involves like making a map of your coworkers and talking to as many people one-on-one as you can to find out like how they feel about unions. Are they interested? Because you're going to have so many wonderful conversations where you're going to think someone doesn't care. And they were like, oh my God, I actually love unions. That's crazy. I also had a little team. We were working to unionize this workplace. And since Drunk Shakespeare is such, each location is pretty small, we have about 20 to 25 employees at each location. It's just talking to them one on one, making sure as many people as we can are in support of it, finding out what their biggest concerns are. It would be a very fast process. And if like, let's say they contact me tomorrow and they're like, Ella, we've decided we need a union. Once we had those conversations with everybody, we could get them authorization cards possibly within like 2 weeks and then just bring them into our contract negotiations.
Well, and then it's a question too of if management voluntarily recognizes. So that a lot of what slows the union process is management saying, no, we're not going to voluntarily recognize this. It has to go to a formal vote. And that say, that's with the Department of Labor and God knows how long that takes. I think our management very smartly saw that we were at 100% authorization. Like they were going to lose any fight and it was going to be expensive. But for companies that are super anti-union who want to delay, that is a tactic. So part of why we moved so quickly is that Drunk Shakespeare management did voluntarily recognize the unions quite quickly.
And you were mentioning something earlier, like 100% support, or like what was that expression that Ella used? And then does that mean that every single person in every single city voted for it?
So we signed authorization cards, which is like a tiny little legal document. One of the wonderful things about Actors Equity is they actually set up online authorization cards, which made it even faster because one of the slowdowns of unionizing sometimes is having to go and get paper signatures from everybody. But authorization cards are a little document that they just say, I want my workplace to be represented by this union. It is not you officially becoming a member of Actors Equity. It is not you taking part in an official union vote, because if we had not gotten that voluntary recognition, what this could look like at a different workplace is to trigger a union election. You need at least 30% of the workplace to sign authorization cards saying, yes, in theory, I want Actors Equity to come represent me. And then if Drunk Shakespeare wanted to fight it, they could say, okay, well, we need to have an official vote, which is, you'll hear a lot of news stories about waiting for election results from unions. And so that's another thing that slows down the process. But because we had 100% authorization cards at every single city, there was no point in fighting us.
And also you mentioned like 20 to 25 employees at each location. In like one given night, how many of those are involved in like a run of the show?
There's always 5 actors, occasionally 4. Should always be 5. And then a manager, maybe an assistant manager, 2 to 3 servers, and a bartender. Like I say, on the busiest night, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe 7 front of house. Does that sound right, Ella?
It really depends on each city. I think the most employees will have working on a single night will be like 10 if people are switching out for shows and stuff.
Yeah, there'll be, the show is stacked. So you'll do up to 4 shows a night, but not hopefully with the same team. So you'll have an actor do 2 shows and one, the first 2, and then somebody will tag in for them. It's just too much. Yeah.
I was just asking for numbers because when me like thinking about unionizing something, I'm like, oh, you need like lots of people. But I'm like, 10 people a show is not like a crazy big show. And you were able to unionize, which is fantastic. And also talking about it in 2020 hindsight, it all sounds very easy and hunky-dory to me. But I guess what were the biggest challenges?
Well, we still don't have a contract. I'd say that's it's a long process. I think we're close, but I also, we've been saying we think we're close for like several 6 months. I don't know. It's been a minute. So that's one of the biggest challenges. And Equity warned us, that you got to be in it for the long game. We have a lot of union members or a lot of people from the original signed authorization cards who no longer work for Drunk Shakes. Either they were terminated, which that's a whole other thing we talked about, or they quit, or like me, like I got a job and moved somewhere else. Just the longevity of like maintaining engagement and enthusiasm and commitment to working for a first contract is really challenging. Once we have the first contract in place, like, negotiating new contracts down the line will be a lot speedier. But that has been the hardest thing.
When I was working with volunteers from EWOC who were helping me organize this, they kept joking that I was doing like a speed run of organizing our workplace just because of how insanely fast it went. And they kept warning me. They were like, okay, well, just because you organized really fast, that doesn't mean the contract negotiation is going to go really fast. And I was like, yeah. And you also told me it would take me like 6 months to organize, but here we are. I can do this. We're just going to zoom on through. And we've been negotiating this contract for, I want to say a little over a year, getting close to a year and a half now. And that it's just, it's taking its time, and there's not much we can do to rush it without like being a detriment to ourselves. So it's just the patience.
And I'll say, like, to Drunk Shakes management credit, like the length of the time it's taking is not because they're stalling, which is a tactic management will often use, and it's not the case. We had a pause in negotiating when there was, I'll say, like an epidemic of what we viewed as unjust terminations of union members. And so we took time and we did reach a settlement with management. But that took some time. Like, we didn't feel that we could negotiate in good faith when these terminations were happening. So we took time to like kind of pause the contract negotiations to negotiate the settlement. And we were able to agree upon that. But now that we're back at the table negotiating, it just takes a long time. Because, one person comes up with their contract and then the other person provides a counter, it's just slow, and it's moving as fast as it can because we can use Zoom. Everybody's in different cities. So that's like great. But even with everybody really wanting a contract as fast as possible, nobody wants a bad contract in place. We don't want to reach a bad contract quickly at the expense of it could be a better contract for everyone, management included, if we take our time.
And this is a collectively bargained agreement that like everybody in every city gets a say in, and then goes against up goes to management and back and forth, and that's like what's happening.
Not quite. Each city has like representatives from the company, so from performers and front of house team, who are in contact with Equity and who are present in we caucus as a group and then in negotiations. But the contract language and things that are happening in negotiations is confidential, intentionally so, because like if I said, okay, we agreed on this in negotiations and then told everybody, and then down the line we had to change it, like that's a way to really disappoint. So negotiations are confidential. What like folks like Ella and I are doing, we share some of the information, or we try and get information from the rest of the company saying like, hey, we're talking about scheduling minimum. How many days a week would you ideally like to be scheduled for, right? Asking questions, getting that feedback. So but it's our job as liaisons to argue for the things that are going to help everybody, not just me, right? Or the individuals. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to have Ella on this call, because I think because it's Equity who's used to dealing with actors, it's very easy, I think, to prioritize like the actor concerns, but we have a lot of front of house who have some very serious needs and concerns. So, but the actual negotiations are confidential. And then Ella, do you know a little bit about like once we TA an agreement, what the next step is?
What it sounds like is we are going to reach a tentative contract with Brass Jar. And then we are going to show that contract to the other union members and be like, hey, after all of our work, this is like what we've come up with. Here are all the points I really like. Here are the points I know you're not going to be that happy with, but this is how we came to that conclusion. Technically, because we are all going to take a vote on it, but I think only fully fledged equity members.
I think that's true. You have to have formally joined. So I think what'll informally happen is that folks like me who joined the union will say like, hey, y'all who didn't join the union, I want to vote for, be a representative, right? And so still voting in favor or not based on everybody's input, because not everyone will be able to formally vote.
Yeah. There's no way I'm going to vote yes on a contract that 90% of my workplace hates.
Okay, wait, you're saying, so are there some people in Drunk Shakespeare that are not union?
Yeah, the way it works is we are an actors equity workplace now. Everyone is like represented by Actors Equity for Drunk Shakespeare purposes. There are members like me and Clara who formally joined Actors Equity. So now we can't go do non-union theater. We are full-fledged members. There are other members of the company who are protected by Actors Equity for this job, but they are not full Actors Equity members. So they can go do non-union theater if they leave Drunk Shakespeare, but they still, while they are at Drunk Shakespeare, have the protections of an equity contract.
Yeah, Arizona's a right to work state. Like there's a lot of places where you can't force people to join a union. Or we just like our company, I think a lot of the actors in Phoenix were quite young and like not ready to join the union because it cuts off that pipeline to non-union work. I talked about why I didn't join the union. I will say one plug: if you organize your workplace, Actors Equity will waive your initiation fee as a way to honor the amount of labor that goes into organizing. And as we're a year and a half out and still negotiating, you can see it's quite a lot of labor. But that was a huge decider for me in actually joining. So I was like, well, when else am I going to get my initiation fee waived? Never. That's a big incentive. If you're wondering if you should unionize your workplace.
That's one little like incentive or big incentive. I don't know.
It's a big incentive. It's a lot of
It's
money.
pretty big incentive, yeah.
Amazing. Okay. Well, I remember when I was teaching at ASU, Clara, your office was across the hall from mine. And I remember you were on Zoom meetings that I couldn't help but overhear about Drunk Shakespeare. And it was like hours and hours. It was like week after week, hours after hours of discussion that I assumed were between you and the producer, but that's not the case. But I guess this thing all going through equity, how has like the back and forth been between management? Like, because we've said management and you've said they've been really good to work with.
Yeah, so we have like the representatives from the company who were in a big WhatsApp group with representatives from Actors Equity. So we have our lawyer from Actors Equity and our chief negotiator. Is that his title? I don't know what David's title is.
I think he's our business representative. Either way, he's our guardian angel.
Yeah. And they're great. I mean, this WhatsApp is great. So we'll literally text, and there was an insane text from DC that's like, we think there's a gas leak. And like, we have a direct pipeline to Actors Equity just through that WhatsApp where they're like, anyways, it was not a gas leak. Someone made mustard gas accidentally with cleaning product. I don't even know. Absolutely insane. So there's that. So we're in that group chat talking kind of informally. And then we have caucuses with those representatives from Actors Equity where we say, like, this is the contract we want. Here's our top priorities in negotiating. Here's like things we're willing to compromise on. And so that's quite a lot of the time is just having those meetings to figure out what we actually want. In the beginning, we came up with like our dream contract, we were also naive. I was like, oh my God, we're going to get paid 100, it was a nice little fantasy exercise. And then we have Zoom meetings where the actual negotiations, that is with upper management. And so that's where the producer and, upper management, the HR person from Drunk Shakespeare, we come together with equity, with the representatives from the acting and front of house company. It's mostly where each side like makes presentations. Like the format we've been doing is like we started by saying, here's our contract proposal. And we read it to them and they said, wow, that's a 150-page document or whatever. Like we need some time. And so then they go off and they take a week or two, read it. And then we come together again and they say, here's our counter proposal. And they read it to us. And then we say, we need some time. And so that is a lot of just like what takes the time is, we're each taking turns proposing Drunk Shakespeare management loves to make a PowerPoint. So we definitely, we watched several PowerPoints, but it's not like, I kind of imagine that negotiations would be us like in the room hashing it out, arguing with each other. And that's really not like, that happens in the caucuses where we are arguing about what we want to propose. But with management, it's more of like much more formal of here's our stuff. We're going to take it back and read it and come back to you in a week or two. And we answer questions, whatever.
One of the reasons that it's taking so long is Drunk Shakespeare has been a company for 10 years and we've got the 5 different cities. And because of how our management works, and they'll hire a manager for each city has kind of evolved a little and they will have their own, like, this is their standard practice. To use a non-controversial example here, like doing laundry, making sure, like for the longest time in Chicago, it's the server's responsibility to make sure the laundry started at the end of the night. And then I'll hear from like Phoenix or DC that the servers, or I think it was DC specifically, that the servers never touch laundry. It's the stage manager's job. And so then we'll have like an hour discussion on whose job is it to press start on the washing machine at the end of the night, or and it's hard to decide like what the best practice is because, I'll hear something that the servers in Phoenix are doing and they'll tell me it. And I'm like, that's insane. That's stupid. I would never mop a floor that way. That's crazy. And then I try it and I'm like, okay, maybe they were right. And so just trying to figure out, there's a lot of different companies kind of in this contract, and finding a way to make all of it mesh into one contract has been a lot of our discussion.
Yeah, and it's a real exercise in learning how to compromise, even within our caucus group of all, not even with management, but just with ourselves, of saying like, I understand that like the thing as written is going to really benefit me. I mean, for example, there are people in the cast who get regularly in all cities who are regularly scheduled, who don't really have to worry about not being scheduled enough because they, for whatever reason, management prioritizes their schedule. And so folks who are in that situation really have to be mindful to not like forget that there's a couple folks who like are fighting to get those hours on the schedule. And so when we're negotiating a schedule, we have to find a way to like make everybody somewhat happy. I think our business rep, David, was really, he's talked a lot about like what a compromise is. And he's like, everyone should walk away from the final contract. No one should walk away super happy, but nobody should walk away super upset, right? It's going to be a true compromise where everyone's like a little pissed about something, but a little excited about something else, of that kind of, I mean, it's true compromise. So that's something that we have to keep in mind, but also not forgetting, like, there's some things that are specific to one city, and I'll use Phoenix as an example, that are crucial, even if they don't affect other cities. And in Phoenix, it's what to do when it's 120 degrees and the theater overheats. That doesn't happen. Maybe it happens in Houston, I don't know, but it doesn't happen in any of the other cities. But when our HVAC goes down in Phoenix, it is an emergency crisis in a way that it's not in DC, even though DC gets plenty hot. So that's an example of it's an outlier. It's just one city with that issue, but it's not something that we can let go, right? Because it doesn't affect the other cities. So it's a real balancing act of figuring out how do we what do we prioritize? How do we make sure everyone's included? It's challenging, but really rewarding.
My favorite example of that is actually from Phoenix and DC. There was a conversation about one of the things this company does that we have always loved is they will pay for an Uber to take the drunk actor home, right? Because we don't want them out on the streets. Definitely don't want them like driving, right? So they will pay for an Uber to take the drunk actor home. That's always been fine in New York and Chicago, but an issue that you guys were having in Phoenix is, okay, how do they get to the theater then if they're taking an Uber home? Like, they can't just drive and leave their car there overnight. So you guys are having to take Ubers to the theater. And that is something like we never even like considered or thought about because it is such a non-issue here in Chicago. And hearing your guys' stories, I was like, oh, that makes complete sense that you have to drive to work. That's insane.
Yeah, I would sometimes take public transportation and it would take 2 hours with what would be a 15-minute drive. So yeah, so there's city specific things, and it's a balance of knowing, okay, is this actually, it's city specific, but is it actually important, or is it necessary? How do we balance all those needs and wants, and thinking about like what will people vote in favor of, right? Like there was a contract, a counter that management put forward that I think would have benefited maybe half of the company, like really well actually, and had no notable improvements for the other half of the company. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, I don't know how I could in good faith ask people to vote in favor of a contract that does not benefit them at all, even though it benefits some people quite a lot. And so we have to be able to consider everybody.
Also, doing the laundry doesn't seem like a contentious issue, but to me, I'm hearing that I think that should be an IATSE job. And I'm like, we need more union in here.
I know, gosh, I think management would keel over and die if we were like, hey, we're bringing another union.
Don't worry, you don't have to worry about that.
No, but it is, there's some of our front of house like doing laundry because there's extra hours, and then there's other cities where the actors are like, I will never touch like, I'm a diva, I'm not going to touch my own laundry, please. But there's other cities where people are saying, no, we don't want to do laundry, and in Phoenix people are like, no, we want those hours. We're like, so figuring out how to balance all those wants, needs.
Yeah. All right. Listener question from Cynthia, a costume designer, nonetheless, who rumor has it has listened to every single episode of this show. But how has the switch to being in the union benefited you, and how specifically?
So so firstly, we have a direct pipeline to equity. So they're like, when DC thought there was a gas leak, which there wasn't, like equity was ready to call, and they were like, okay, we could have gotten the show shut down right away if it had in fact been a gas leak. So we have and equity has an emergency hotline. Like there's some tangible ways that we can contact them and have someone with more authority than us say, no, you can't do this. So that's one way. They're just better because they have a lawyer, a team of, they're just better at getting Drunk Shakes to enforce things that already exist in our first contract. So, when, for example, one of the actors in Phoenix saw a reduction in his schedule for the upcoming month and was like, hey, what the Equity sent a very stern email, and lo and behold, the next month his schedule is now better. So sometimes it's not that Equity is doing anything necessarily, they're just able to have this kind of authority figure to say, no, if you do this, it's an issue. And then we have had to file quite a few unfair labor practices. We were able to settle quite a few of them. And that to me is perhaps the most financially tangible. I mean, some of our actors saw significant payouts for unjust terminations that we would have never in a million years achieved without Equity. We still have several ULPs, unfair labor practices, in play, I believe, that it remains to be seen where those go. That's a very lengthy process because you're dealing with the federal and state governments. But those are things that we wouldn't have known how to do, or even, I don't even know if we could do it without a union. That's some very tangible financial gains that some of our company has taken away, those who no longer work for the company when that wasn't their choice.
I have been working for Drunk Shakespeare for almost 3 years. And in that 3 years, the percentage of time I've worked at Drunk Shakespeare where we have had a working ice machine for our bar has been maybe 10%. And so we've had to deal with a lot of issues of okay, well, we're just going to send a server out with the company card to go to Walgreens and buy ice. Or we had a while where we were getting Instacart orders of ice deliveries and dealing with all of that. And it was every night, it was such a headache. And Equity came in and was like, hey, you guys need to give them an ice machine. And they're like, oh yeah, we're working on it. And they're like, okay, you've been working on it for a while now. And when we took the pause from bargaining, one of the things that Equity said was okay, to consider this lawsuit settled, you have to fix safety concerns or anything that's broken in the theater. Here's the list, and you have to buy Ella an ice machine. Please, we're sick of hearing about it. I'm sure you guys are more sick. And we have a working functional ice machine. It's beautiful. It makes enough ice for Ah, I love it.
It makes so much ice you can send it to the other locations.
Please,
Down
yeah.
to
But
Arizona
you
and
know,
Houston, they need it.
But we learned too that there was like a communication pipeline issue where upper management just didn't even know, like the ice machine aside, they just didn't even know about some of the issues because we don't know. Like maybe the local managers thought they could handle it on their own. Like I'm not trying to throw people on the bus, but there was clearly like I think we put together a document that Equity sent over that was like, here are all the issues in all the cities, and Drunk Shakespeare management put together a response. And in one of the cities, they're like, no, this has been fixed. I think it was in DC with their dishwasher, maybe. And DC was like, it absolutely hasn't. Like somebody told, like, I don't know what the communication issue is. Like, because upper management isn't in all the cities. Like mostly they're in New York. They'll travel around, but they're relying on local managers who, for whatever reason, the local managers I think are quite overworked, but they're not part of the bargaining unit, so we can't help them. We learned too that there's like pipeline communication issues that Equity, being that voice of authority, is able to kind of summarize everything that's happening in the cities and share that with management in a way that has been really productive.
Awesome. New topic. Has Drunk Shakespeare unionizing influenced any other immersive shows or any other places? And I ask this question because from a distance, I assumed Drunk Shakespeare was already organized. And now I realize you're working with a tentative agreement and you're still working on that long-term contract. So that's where I bring that question from. But I'm just wondering if in all your work to do this, has anybody else from other organizations or immersive shows reached out to you to be like, hey, we might be interested too?
yes. I'm trying to think of which one. Can't talk about some of them yet, unfortunately. But yes, there have been other immersive shows that have either reached out to me specifically, or they've reached out to us like on our Instagram. There actually was this one place in New York. It's like called New York Live. It's a dance company.
New York
And they
Live
reached
Art.
out to me. Yeah, New York Live Arts. They just unionized and they are not joining the dance union or any of the big unions. They are like starting their own thing. And so like they reached out to me and they were like, hey, how did you get your front of house unionized? So that was a great, wonderful conversation. Love them, support them. If anybody is listening and wants help organizing, feel free to reach out to us on Instagram. Or if you're not theater and you're listening and you have a different workplace, reach out to the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee and we will help you. I am like there anytime someone with a performance, any sort of performance question reaches out to EWOC. I'm like, let me jump on it. I know more about performance contracts than anybody should ever have to.
And I mean, there's like a big national movement. Like you're seeing more and more workplaces organizing. Certainly, we're part of that. But I think like what I've taken from this is like because Equity is also representing like the strippers at Star Garden. Like the notion of performance is broader than I think I had originally thought of. Actors Equity represents actors, but clearly represent strippers. They'll represent actors who get wasted on stage, and they'll represent servers and bartenders working in these performance environments. So that was kind of exciting for me to learn. And I do think the mascots at Disney organized. Is that right?
I'm pretty sure it's the character performers.
Character
I
performers.
think that includes the mascots. I know it like includes like face characters, like whoever is dressing up as Aladdin.
I just saw your little note in here about mascots, but
Oh,
if the
yeah.
Times Square mascots wanted to unionize, I bet they could through Equity because they are performers. Looking at your notes.
I would love to see that happen. Like all those characters be part of the union.
I love Actors Equity is so open right now to including people who don't feel like they would have traditionally had a place in Actors Equity. Like our bartenders are a great example of that. The strippers at Star Garden, love them. But they are represented by Actors Equity, and that is a long, intense fight that's going on. But I had the pleasure of meeting a couple of them back in April. And anytime I have any sort of complaint about our contract or our workplace or our ULPs, I hear one word from the strippers and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. There is actually an escape room in California that unionized with Actors Equity. And that's great. When I was in college and stuff, I was really into haunted house performancing. like performances and haunted house acting. And there's like big haunted house like conventions I would go to every year. Actually, in St. Louis, there's a giant haunted house convention called Trans World. I love it. And haunted houses are very dangerous places to work in. So my dream one day is to go around on a tour unionizing haunted houses across America.
And ultimately, every new workplace organized is a win for equity because that's more places equity members can work. I mean, being in Phoenix, there's what, 2 equity houses in Arizona or something like that. Well, now there's 3, I don't know the exact numbers, but like there weren't many places that equity actors could work in Phoenix. And now there's another one that not only is another job, but it's a recurring contract, format like that's huge. So it's a benefit to union members. And I also frankly think it's a benefit to the company, even though I don't know if they would agree with all the work that they're having to do, but it opens up a broader pool of people that they can hire because they can bring in equity actors as well. And I think that's a huge win for both sides of the table.
And I think it's a win for them too, because it's like, then there's rules. And so there's no gray, like, is it right? Is it wrong? Is it moral? Is it immoral? It's like, well, these are the rules we have. And you don't have to think about it. Like, it doesn't have to be your call. Like, you don't have to be a good or a bad person. You can just do your job.
Yeah.
I was curious, the ticket sale thing earlier of like, there's a lull in the summer. Do we know, there's no way for us to know this, but financially, has this hurt Drunk Shakespeare? Are people going to lose their jobs from Drunk Shakespeare now that they're all equity?
I don't know how much we can say that's not privileged. Like we have both seen like PowerPoints about the company's finances and negotiations. I don't know that we can disclose that specific information. I think the company they had 2 long-running successful shows in theater cities in New York and Chicago, and then they opened shows. I think DC might be doing quite well, but they opened shows in cities that have different markets. And I think they're figuring out how to operate theaters in those markets. Like I'll say in Phoenix, the average person who comes to our show is not a theater goer versus like when I saw Drunk Shakes in New York a gajillion years ago. That was why I even auditioned in Phoenix. I knew what it was. I knew it was a play. We get tourists coming to New York just for the theater. They know they're going to a play. So I think there's some growing pains of just figuring out the different markets. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. I don't know, Ellie, what do I think?
This contract is being bargained and being negotiated. We are not going to put forth and sign a contract that is going to bankrupt Drunk Shakespeare. Our goal is to make sure that this theater can continue to run in a safe and healthy manner. And hopefully, like having these kinds of structures in place will actually help them grow financially too, and be able to hire more actors. And it's just going to help Drunk Shakespeare in the long term.
I agree. We really, because all of us love working there. We wouldn't be doing this whole really arduous process of unionizing if we didn't want to keep working there. Like people could have just quit. But there's a lot of love for the company. I think like there was some boilerplate language in the initial contract proposal that was like, would have required management to like rip out the floors and replace, and we were like, this would actually bankrupt the company. Like it was not a practical recommendation. Like we're not trying to propose anything that is not doable. And it's been quite nice, like being in negotiations because we're getting some transparency from management about things that like we just didn't know. Didn't know previously, like the arc of the finances and whatever. And so that transparency has actually been quite helpful. And I would encourage management to continue on that track of transparency because it just helps everybody know that we're all working for the same thing, which is more shows, more opportunities for work, and more money for everybody.
It's going to help them. And there's also the case of, I think that there are occasionally companies whose managers or like their upper management doesn't know what they can afford, and having this kind of contract like laid out has been very nice. And then it's helped us make sure we are asking for realistic things that we know we can win. For example, like, renovating every theater and completely demolishing walls so we can have a bigger dresser room. Sure. Would I love that? Ideal. It would bankrupt the company. Replacing an ice machine? Easy. They can do that. We know they can afford that.
And I also asked that question because like USA 829, if you put a designer on a contract, it takes their fee up 21%. And that sounds like a lot, right? But then you think, well, the designers are only one portion of the budget item. So that's 20% of that budget item, not the budget overall. Like compared to the rent, pales in comparison. We're now union, we weren't before. It's so much more expensive. But I imagine it's not as ridiculous as you might imagine.
There are things with this union contract that will actually be saving them money in the long term. And I think that some of their operating expenses might go down after this contract because of just having those kinds of rules in place.
Yeah, like rules for safety will reduce workers' comp claims. Like that's a clear net win for literally everyone.
Okay, all right. If you were going to do this again, go union, is there anything you would tell yourself or maybe tell somebody else that's thinking about getting their people to go union?
I think I would just stress how long it takes over and over and over again. Because even being told that, we were like, no, we're going to bag it out. We're going to like it takes a long time and people come and go. Like, you know, I just kind of naturally left the company. And so like continuing to engage the full company of people so that you can have people tagging in. Like there's a new person from Phoenix, not new, but like new to negotiating who's replacing me because I can't commit in the same way that I had been. I'm still there, but you know, I have a whole other job to do. So that long-term commitment and like ability to energize people is something I would just stress to everybody because it's that's the hardest part by far, I think, is this like I'm you know, like not to toot my own horn, but how selfless am I? Like I'm not going to benefit from this contract. Like I'm going to get everybody in the company a huge win that I will see none of. And so I think I'm just nosy and I like being part of all the negotiations and knowing what's happening. But you really have to think about like, well, okay, what is my buy-in to this? Can I commit to something long-term that hopefully will benefit me, but like maybe not if you just, depending, there are contracts that take years to negotiate.
I think it also might benefit you, Clara, being in the union, because then you'll have to turn down certain jobs that you would maybe take if you weren't in the union. So maybe it could be a net benefit of like, oh, you now don't have to spend 9 weeks on this contract that you would have taken not being part of the union.
And it is true. I mean, I get to walk away a member of equity with my dues, not my dues pay, I pay the dues, but with my initiation fee paid and the ability to like make demands of workplaces that I couldn't before. So that, yeah, that's a great point. I'm definitely walking away proud to be an equity member, but it's a long, arduous process.
If I were to do it again, I would do it 1,000 times again. I have really gotten, we keep saying, being bit by the organizing bug, but it has been like such a rewarding and like fulfilling process. For things I would tell myself or other new organizers is, and this is something that like I was told in my training and it came so naturally to our company that I didn't realize how much of an issue it would be at other companies, is the importance of like socializing before you organize. The group that was working when we started this organizing process, like we were hanging out outside of work at least once a week, at least once a month. Someone would be having a party that everyone was invited to. Like we saw each other all the time. And like it really helped the organizing process because it's like, okay, I know what's going on in your life. I know what you want in a contract. Like I know who you are as a person. And there were times where, you know, because of schedules and people's life changing and, you know, the way that this company like turns over, it was like there would be times where we didn't, you know, get to hang out for a while, or like a lot of people left and then we got new people in who I didn't know as well. And it kind of led to a little bit of like burnout because I was like, I'm trying to negotiate this contract and I don't even know what you guys want anymore. Like I forgot who you are. And so just the importance of like really getting to know your coworkers is such a big thing. And it's so important to this. And it's so rewarding.
Well, I want to commend you both because I'm very impressed. And the amount of time, I mean, to me, time is like the thing. You putting in so much time. I mean, we say how fast it went, right? But it's still ongoing. And it's also been a year and 2 months. And again, like all those hours that I heard in Arizona, just hours of a bunch of people on a Zoom talking over all this minutia over and over and over again. So I think it's for the greater good of everybody. So I commend you. We mentioned Instagram. Is that the best way to get a hold of you guys if somebody wants to reach out?
Instagram's great. We have our Instagrams. We have the Drunk Shakes United Instagram. That I check that daily. So
I'll put links to those in the show notes, and also the other things we've mentioned. We've said a lot of like the Ewok company thing organizing. So if anybody listening has questions about something that they wanted to look up, I'll have a whole list in the show notes that will trigger your brain as to what you wanted to look at. All right, you two, thank you so much. This was awesome.
thank you. This was
Thank
fun.
you. Yeah.
That's it for this week's episode. Since we recorded this, the Drunk Shakespeare companies who joined Actors Equity have ratified their collectively bargained agreement, and the Drunk Shakespeare company at large is in the process of offering equity contracts to everyone. So, a big congratulations to Ella and Clara and everyone who worked to make that happen. A couple takeaways I had from the conversation. The rumor that Actors Equity wouldn't work with performers because of drinking on stage. That makes me so frustrated that that happened, but thankful that we live in a world in which getting answers to things is easier and easier. I'm glad the performers found their way to Actors Equity, but oof, that was not cool of whoever started that rumor. That's why we have that saying, trust but verify. The other takeaway I had is reflection of how important unions are now, especially that the United States has once again elected a political party that is anti-union and anti-gig workers and anti-social safety nets. It reminds me of why we have unions in the first place. Workers need protections, and joining together is the only way to get them. The motto of the United States of America is E pluribus unum, out of many, one. And it's such a powerful phrase, and it's perfect for a government. Bring the colonies together. They can accomplish more working together, and they can fight for their rights as a collective. And it reminds me exactly of what Drunk Shakespeare United did. The individual companies were winning some things, but not getting everything they needed. A couple people rallied the troops and banded together, and as such, they fought for their rights. All right, that's all I have. If you'll be in Las Vegas on December 8th or 9th, please swing by the LDI conference at 11 o'clock both of those days. We're recording a podcast each day, and anybody is free to swing by and listen in. You can get a free pass to the conference by using the code Artistic Finance, all one word, all caps. I would absolutely love to see you there if you're going to be in town. If you're enjoying this show and you'd like to support me and the family, you can become a patron of the show. All patrons get early access and ad-free episodes, and I am very appreciative of the support. And you can sign up at patreon.com/artisticfinance. And if you're listening this week from Wyoming, please reach out to me and let me know that. Every week I see one download from Wyoming, and I'm just curious, who is this Wyomingite who's listening to the podcast, probably while they're riding around on a horse? I don't know. Anyway, if that's you, let me know just because I'm curious. All right, I have been ending every episode with a dad joke, but I'm still a little bit downtrodden with the election results, and I'm looking ahead at the fight we have for the next 2 years. So not only do we have to be extra vigilant to advocate and protect our marginalized communities, LGBTQ, trans, Black and BIPOC, women, disabled, religious, non-religious, immigrants, refugees. Not only do we have to fight alongside all of them, we also have to fight for reallocation of government spending that I just read might include a cut to Social Security. Now, I cannot believe that a government party would even consider defunding Social Security, which helps every single person in the United States. But that is the type of absurdity that we are faced with. So, no dad joke to end the episode, but I will end on a positive note, and that is just to stand firm and stay hopeful because each voice for justice builds a more inclusive and resilient future. A future that is going to come, and we are going to be here for it, and it's going to be great. All right. That's it for today. Until next time, break a leg.
Thank you for listening to Artistic Finance, where we interview successful artists, leaders, and investors to help educate and inspire the creative community. To access our show notes and resources, go to artisticfinance.com. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Before making any decision, consult a professional. This show is copyrighted by Artistic Finance. Written permission must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting.